You know, right now, there's a secret war happening on the world's oceans, and it's not being fought with warships, but with hundreds of old, untraceable oil tankers. The prize here isn't territory, it's the billions of dollars that are funding a very real war on land. So today, we're diving into the story of Russia's shadow fleet.
Our story really kicks off with a bang, literally. On November 28, 2025, two oil tankers just mysteriously explode out in the Black Sea. Now, this was not some simple accident. It was actually the first visible crack in a massive clandestine operation, an operation designed to keep a war machine running.
And when you look at the details of these two ships, the Kairos and the Virat, the real story starts to come out. So both were flying the flag of Gambia. That's a classic flag of convenience, which makes it super hard to track down their true owners. And get this, they were already sanctioned by the West. So when Turkish officials started suspecting an external impact, like a drone, it became crystal clear these weren't ordinary tankers. They were ghosts, part of a fleet built specifically to hide in plain sight.
Yeah, these explosions were way more than just an isolated incident. They were a revelation. They basically pulled back the curtain on this massive strategic network that we now know as Russia's secret oil fleet.
So what is a shadow fleet exactly? Well, think of it as this sprawling collection of older tankers. Their ownership is incredibly murky, and they often sail without proper insurance. Their one job, their only job, is to get sanctioned Russian oil to market, completely bypassing all those Western restrictions and price caps. It's the absolute key to keeping the cash flowing to the Kremlin. And the scale of this operation is just staggering. We're not talking about a handful of ships here. Analysts estimate that this fleet is anywhere between 300 to 600 tankers, all of them dedicated to this one high-stakes trade.
And please, don't mistake this for some small-time operation. The shadow fleet isn't just part of Russia's oil export strategy. It pretty much is the strategy now. It moves something like 2/3 of all the crude oil that Russia sells by sea. So this is not a sideshow. It's the main event.
And all of that control translates directly into cold, hard cash. This fleet allows Russia to earn somewhere between $110 and $155 billion every single year. That is the financial engine this entire covert operation is built to protect.
So you have to be asking, how do they do it, right? How do hundreds of ships move billions of dollars in sanctioned oil without getting caught? Well, they've got a playbook. You can think of it as a massive shell game, just played out across the world's oceans.
Okay, so a core tactic is basically laundering the oil right there on the water. First, a sanctioned or dirty tanker loads up with Russian crude. Then, way out in international waters, it pulls up next to a clean, unsanctioned tanker and performs what's called a ship-to-ship transfer. That clean ship then just sails into port, with paperwork that completely hides where the oil really came from. And it's not just the ship-to-ship transfers. They use what are called false flags, where they're constantly changing their country of registration to avoid anybody looking too closely. They even blend Russian Urals crude with other types of oil to disguise it as something else entirely. And you know what? These methods work. I mean, just look at the numbers. Over 11 billion euros worth of Russian oil has been laundered in EU waters alone since 2022. This whole situation has created a huge geopolitical standoff. You've got the West on one side trying to choke off Russia's oil money with sanctions, and on the other side, you've got these foundational principles of international law getting in the way. Now, the West isn't just sitting on its hands here. Hundreds of these shadow vessels have been hit with sanctions. The EU has targeted over 550, the UK's gone after more than 350. There is a very real, active effort to shut this whole network down. At the same time, Russia's rhetoric has gotten incredibly heated. Back in September 2025, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed that NATO and the EU have, and this is a direct quote, declared a real war on his country. Framing it like that just raises the stakes for any kind of direct confrontation. And that brings up a really critical question. If Russia is using war rhetoric, and these tankers are sailing right through the waters of NATO members like Denmark and Turkey, why can't those countries just, stop them?
Well, the answer is kind of fascinating. It comes down to this powerful, centuries-old principle of maritime law called innocent passage. See, under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, ships from any country have the right to pass through another country's waters, as long as that passage isn't a threat to the peace or security of that state. And here's the kicker. Simply evading sanctions, as important as it is, just doesn't meet that high legal bar for a blockade.
So this is the fundamental conflict, right here. You've got Western sanctions, which are a weapon designed to stop the flow of Russian oil. But then you have international law, which acts like a shield, designed to protect the flow of all navigation. These two powerful forces are in direct opposition, and that creates a legal gray zone that the shadow fleet just expertly exploits.
So let's connect all the dots. What does this whole cat-and-mouse game on the high seas actually mean? Well, it means everything for Russia's ability to wage war. This isn't just about economics. At the end of the day, it's about funding a military campaign.
To really get the stakes, all you have to do is follow the money. Even after years of sanctions, fossil fuels still make up nearly half of all of Russia's export revenue. The entire Russian economy and its federal budget is fundamentally hooked on this income. And that's exactly why this fleet is the center of gravity. Oil and gas directly fund a quarter of the entire federal budget. If the West could somehow find a way to cut Russia's oil shipments by just 20 to 30%, it could slash revenues by up to $40 billion. That's the equivalent of 10 to 15% of their military spending. Hitting the shadow fleet means directly hitting Russia's ability to buy ammo, pay soldiers, and keep its war going.
So we're left with this huge, critical question. You have hundreds of ships in a multi-billion-dollar game of hide-and-seek, all to fund a war, and you have international law stuck right in the middle. So how does this shadow war at sea finally end?